Good morning. It's Wednesday, August 13th. I'm Phil Streible, Chief Market Strategist at Blue Line Futures. So a lot of green on the screen, and it's time to make silver great again. Held that trend line support yesterday, up about 1.68%, sitting up 63 cents as of this recording at 38.64. So we'll see what happens here on the silver market. Could push up to about 38.80 here on the day. So it was a nice short squeeze here in the Russell 2000 yesterday. Many of our clients here were positioned for the upside and a breakout rally on that market. If you look at the chart pack, multiple upside targets and key levels of support and resistance were tested and successfully held. The chart pack and the metals edge really are essential resources for anyone who's serious about futures trading. If you haven't done so, register in the link in the description below. We'll get that sent out to you. So stocks, they look like they're set here for another record high. And something you need to bookmark here, the CME's Fed Watch tool, it suggests here in September that the Fed rate cut probability sits at about 96.2% chance. You've got Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent suggesting that the Fed should open it up to a bigger interest rate cut in September. The date on that, September 17th. So bookmark the CME's Fed Watch tool on one of your tabs here and circle that date or put it in your calendar that's going to be a big mover here in the markets, and we'll see what happens there. So you want to monitor probabilities for that interest rate cut. You can also front run that by watching the movements in the dollar index and also 10-year treasury yields in the gold market. Now, we do have risk appetite growing with the shorts capitulated. If you look at Wall Street's so-called fear gauge, the volatility index sitting at the lowest level this year, down at 1570, and that's the August futures contracts. There is a mini, a regular, and a micro VIX futures contract that people could trade over here. Now, the S&P 500 and the NASDAQ just edging up slightly. S&P 500, 64.80, up about 11.5 points. You do have the NASDAQ up about 50 at 23,990. Did breach that 24,000 level. The Russell 2000, again, leading the charge, up over 0.5%, pushing on up through 2,300, sitting at 23.04. So we'll want to keep an eye on that as well. So many of the companies were lifted in the Russell 2000, and something we've been watching is small cap revenue growth. It really exploded in the last quarterly earnings report. We did also have that NFIB small business survey here, and it's just a survey, but it really did exceed expectations. And some of the commentary was that many of these small businesses are continuing to expand and grow. So you look at across markets on multi-duration time frames, some of the strongest markets out there, S&P 500, obviously, feeder cattle and Ethereum. Those are the ones that across different durations really look good and start to shine. Total beef supply in the U.S. is expected to drop about 2.5% in 2026 to 31.1 billion pounds. That's the lowest level since 2019. That comes from the USDA. That was one of the monthly reports that came out. That's why your feeder cattle continues to push on higher. Your weakest markets, look at natural gas. That's one that continues to slump. Look at the weather, look at the injections. There's just not that significant demand for natural gas at the moment. The volatility index, of course, with the complacency and the grind higher in the U.S. equity markets. And then finally, your other weakest market out there, really the corn market. That drop comes with expectations for another record U.S. harvest, seen bigger than expected. So some of the overnight price action here, we continue to look at the dollar down 40 ticks here, sitting at 97.52. Looking at 10-year treasury yields down, edging lower at 4.25%. You look at gold, making new highs here. And gold was the one, if you talked to me yesterday and our clients, many of them call in and we have some casual conversations about the futures markets. The most disappointing after that CPI move really was the gold market. And you had two things. You had the rug pull that took place that last Thursday night, Friday with that tariff. They coppered the gold market here with that rug pull. And then you have also this discussion about possibility for peace in the Ukraine. So it's just been some of the geopolitical tensions have really died down, and that's what kind of rug pulled the gold market. Small lift up in the dollar index recently also put a little bit of pressure on there, so we'll want to monitor the correlation between gold and the dollar index and also yields. You look at silver futures, and really that's the one that I believe is going to start to break away here because you had that upward movement in the copper market yesterday. You got some strength in the gold market. So gold recapturing 3,400, sitting at 34.16, up about $17, and on the high high of the session as of this recording here. Now, we did talk about ETF flows, and we saw massive flows into that gold market, anticipating buying that dip when it fell about $80 2 sessions ago, and that was where traders had really positioned. So are they going to hold on to this position and look for some upward price momentum, perhaps 34.47, 34.70, push even back on up to all-time highs before they start to let some of that go? We'll want to monitor that as well. You look at the copper market trading near its highest in almost 3 weeks after climbing about 1.1% yesterday. Traders were really looking for some key economic data out of the US, out of China. And then you got crude oil futures just edging lower after the International Energy Agency said that they're seeing growth. The surplus of oil is really continuing to accelerate higher here. And you look at crude oil futures starting to break through some levels of support. And that was a market that we couldn't break out to triple digits when we had one of the most insane geopolitical developments occur between US, Israel, and Iran. And that really caps the crude oil market going forward as far as geopolitical risks are concerned. So if you look at oil prices starting to drift lower, and President Trump has been very critical about oil prices recently, wanting to get those oil prices back into the 50s. And a lot of times some of these things that he said have come true. So we can continue to monitor that. We'll look at that in the chart pack. We'll look at some of the tactical ranges, some of the probable ranges in that market as well. We have Bitcoin edging higher here, 121,000. Ethereum really exploded. That's one of the strongest markets out there. There's a micro contract on that for anyone who's looking to gain some exposure on a small leverage basis in the cryptocurrencies here. You can look at the micro Bitcoin, which is 1/10 of a Bitcoin, and also the Ethereum, which is the same as well. Now, if you look at European trading, well, we did see in European stocks, they advanced overnight. In Asian trading, we saw Asian equities, they gained here with the MSCI rising about 1.5% here, up for its 3rd consecutive day and touching the highest level since February 2021. Today, we'll have 2 Fed speakers coming out here, and we'll also have the MBA's reading on mortgage applications. So we'll start monitoring more on the housing data and things like that as we get closer to that Fed cut. See if it slows down coming to that as people are waiting for some kind of break in interest rates. Now, if you look at the precious metals, the ETF flows, something that we look at, there was buys in gold, silver, and sells in platinum here. With gold up 11%, that's the year-to-date percentage change of flows going into the ETF here. And the exchange-traded funds, well, they added about only 26,000 troy ounces, but it was the 4th straight day of growth, and that's really important here. We want to see the continuation of growth come into there, and then the rate of change of that growth continue to accelerate higher, because you look at the silver market, well, that's up 10% as well, but the ETFs, they added 2.74 million ounces yesterday, so it was a big jump up here, and that's where that acceleration and that rate of change really comes into play. So you look at the sugar market, that's one that did break out to the upside here. A little bit of concern here about Brazil, their crops. So if you look at the chart pack and you get that, you'll see that we've been in this consolidation sideways pattern for a while. We tried to break out yesterday, and we'll see if we can continue that upward movement here. So you guys got any questions? It's going to be a really busy day here again here, especially with that movement in silver, in gold, in U.S. equities. A lot of people focusing on the euro and also other currency markets, and perhaps even the treasury markets as well. So you got any questions, shoot an email, info@bluelinefutures.com. Register for the chart pack here. And then remember, futures and option trading, well, it involves risk of loss, and it may not be suitable to all investors. So good luck, good trading.